free. We should feel like we're constantly just getting started, like God is starting a new thing, or we're jumping into this next adventure, or we're continuing down and lifting up this one that we're currently on. We're looking at this morning, we're looking at generational moments. A moment that maybe is massive or very small, but it potentially affects generations to come. And the key idea that we're going to be looking at is just this: the lives of future generations will radically be changed because of moments created by the people of the Grove. So again, it's a statement for who we are and what we're looking at. The lives of future generations will radically be changed because of moments created by people of the Grove. That's you. That's every single person in this room buying into the fact that your life not only matters, but it can bring global change. And as a missions pastor, quote unquote, I prefer pastor of adventures, but as the mission pastor, through this last couple of years, it's, well, how do we continue to live missionally and do mission trips if we can't go on a mission trip? And that right there is the problem. When you think that I have to go to Malawi to live on mission. Now, I'm telling you this, you should go and it will change your life. But you can do those things right now. And if you grasp the understanding of a moment that changes generations. In your mind, think about a moment. Something that happened to you, something that stuck with you. It could be a big moment. It could be a small moment. It could be something. Now, if you're brave, I just had shoulder replacement surgery. They didn't think I could throw it to the top level. I can't. There's big moments, there's powerful moments, there's small moments, there's these moments that like it's just this, that's like 1, 2, that's 4 rows back. Oh, thank you very much, I'm done. You know, these moments that you have, it shapes you. And it's just a thing that you look back on, but it could be this powerful, powerful moment. But it also could be a moment that's filled with pain. Either way, they're shaping you. Sometimes there's just these small passing moments that you don't even realize the significance of it. Sometimes there's the moment that you missed because you were afraid to step into it. Now, if you caught one of these balls, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to stand up and share something. You didn't catch it. That was your moment. I'm in the front row. You threw like 100 miles an hour. It's a plastic little ball. You got it. You're good. So be thinking, not all of you, and you also have a moment to go, to give it to somebody else if you want to miss out on that moment. But be thinking, it doesn't have to be this huge moment, but there are moments that change people. For me, when I look back on my life, moving to Bangkok, Thailand as a kid shaped the entire rest of my life. Moving back to America also shaped it. Believe it or not, that was one of the most painful moments of my life. Getting married, significant moment. Good job, Paul, way to get that in. There's also been moments moving to Guatemala with my family. Like I didn't go to become a missionary, I went to find myself and figure out what faith was. Like I really honestly was like, what does this whole thing mean? Moving back to Chandler. You know, that was a moment. When COVID started, that was a moment. I never even realized that we would have people online that would be watching us, and they have moments. And see, here's what happened. You can't just sit on your couch. You have a moment too. So think about that. We all have these experiences that have changed us. Late 80s, early 90s, picture it. I was in a hip hop group. This is kind of what I expected you to do. Many of you don't believe me, but see the picture right here? Look at the picture. See the guy in the middle? Focus in, look at the mustache. Let's go a little deeper. Boom. That's called perfect form. Do it, Paul. No. Perfect form. Get rid of that picture, please. I remember I was standing on stage and I was doing the whole Jesus talk in between one of our songs, and I walked off the stage and it was an amazing moment. I'm signing autographs and I feel like a man. And my future wife comes to me, and I don't know if it was in that moment, that next day or that next week, but she came up to me, and I think we were walking, and she just says, hey, you know, those things that you're saying on stage are cool. But if you're going to say them and you're going to stand on the stage, you need to live them. And I just went, oh. And my response probably was, I am. But anytime somebody's voice goes up, they're lying to you. And so that moment has stayed with me. And the heaviness of standing on a stage like this it's powerful and painful. You see, when you stand on a stage, when some of us guys or girls are up here sharing, we're spilling our soul. And I want you to know we're seeing the faces of every single one of you. Side note, when you fall asleep, we do see that. Just because your eyes are closed and you can't see me doesn't mean I can't see you. It still happens. Carry on. So one of you, it doesn't have to be all of you, but one of you that held that, I would like you to stand up and share just a quick moment in your life that lasted. Powerful, painful. Don't speak until our ushers, kind ushers, come forward. And we have sanitized the mics. They're clean, so don't worry. So what is a moment for you? Tell us your name. Tell us your moment.
My name is Ben Sheridan.
And because I know Ben, you have 30 seconds.
Something that changed my life was having a family member have a medical issue. It drastically changed where money went, just what mattered in life.
Why did that medical moment change you?
It changed what mattered in life.
Which is?
Family, people.
Okay. So you dove deeper into those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the world is, you're always searching to try to get that next thing, and so all of a sudden realizing how precious time is.
Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes life just goes and just is in that powerful moment, and it changes. And probably every single one of us just went, yeah, I've been there. Somebody else, have some courage in the back. Scott, you got to run. See now, you are the
just
runner.
Meet me halfway.
No.
Just come
Don't
over.
meet him halfway.
Just
Make
meet
him
me
walk
halfway.
Don't meet him.
Listen, I've got a mic too. I'm just as here.
My name is Tiffany, and I was fired from my job in banking. And that day, I went and enrolled in college for nursing school.
Is that something that you had been thinking of doing for a while?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can relate. I've been planning on moving, but we didn't plan on doing it for a while. And then the person that owns our house says, I need you to move within a couple weeks. Okay, and that launches you on a new, beautiful journey, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's what God's calling in my life was for. And I graduated 5 years ago, and so my very first patient I had off of orientation as a new grad. At the end of the shift, he looked at me and he said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "I am." He said, "I can tell."
There you
And
go.
that stuck
Makes it
with
worth it.
me forever.
Thank you. Where'd Nate go? Is there one more?
I think that's it, Paul.
Where are you? Okay. You're making them stand. Do you want to stand? Tell us any moment. I scored a touchdown. Anything.
My name's Casey Martis. Been going to Grove here for about, what did you say, 5-6 years? Yeah, and when we started coming here, we were looking for a new church. We just moved to Mesa from Scottsdale, and we went to Highlands Church. I don't know if you guys are familiar. And we were really looking for a place to call our home. The second we walked in here, my wife burst into tears, and we knew we were home. And just coming here changed our lives.
Thank you. You see, as we share our stories, what it does is it softens you. Now, when I'm standing up speaking, there's always a lot of heads turning and people conversating and having things. But then when you share, it's instant, like you dial in and you just listen. But you take that story. And every time you come to the Grove and you see one of these three, you're going to go, oh, that's so-and-so. You're going to remember their story. You're going to forget their name, but you're going to remember their story. You see, there's power in these moments. And the beauty of it is you never really know when that moment is. If you know me, you've heard me speak, you've heard me talk about how my life was changed in 1926. Radically altered. My grandma and my grandfather got off the boat in Phnom Penh because they were called to be missionaries, and they stepped into this city that they've never been to without knowing where to go, and made it on somebody's front porch and slept there for the night, and then lived in that country and then in Thailand for years and years and years. I would not be standing on this stage if it wasn't for their act of faith. But I was talking to my parents this last week, and I was curious on what are the moments before the moments. Like, how did they get to that? Who gets off a ship, first of all, not knowing where you're going to spend the night, the first night, and still stays married? Like, that part right there, that's mind-boggling. And my dad said that my grandfather came to the States from Norway, and when she was about 5 or 6, she was playing out in the street. And while she's playing, these two ladies came out of this church, And they called her over and they said, hey, would you like to come into our service? And she said, sure. She went in, became a Christian, and never left. My great-grandfather owned a bar in Virginia, which isn't that bad, but in whatever year that was bad. And because of the type of bar this was, it was really, really bad. And my great-grandfather ran away. And years later, 2 ladies invited him to church. And he stepped into that church and became a Christian. Those moments changed generation upon generation upon generation. I have no idea who those 4 ladies are. But the story continues that some ladies invited your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, into church, and that changed the course of history for me. It was a small invitation. You see, you never really know when you're stepping into this journey with Jesus, you never really know how powerful a moment can be. There was a guy named Nicholas Herman. Actually, he was from France, so Herman, something like that. He was born into extreme poverty. When he was 16 years old, there was a war going on. He signed up for the military because he thought to himself, if I sign up with the military, there's a good chance I'll be killed. But if I'm not, I get 2 meals a day and a small stipend. So Nicholas signs up, instantly goes to war, and he gets his 2 meals a day. And when he's 18, he's been in battle for a couple years. He's sitting there in the middle of all this carnage, and he's looking around, and he's just thinking about his life, what he was born into, why he was having to deal with all of these things. He said he sat there in the battle, and he looked off in the distance, and he saw this tree, and it was the middle of winter, so the tree looked completely dead. And he just sat there staring at that tree and these dead branches and this look of just nothingness. And then he said he stopped and he paused and he realized that in a matter of months, when spring came, that tree would be in full bloom. And it would go from a tree that's looking like it's dead to a tree that's completely alive. He said in that moment, he said it's as if God spoke to him. He said, if God can transform a tree like that, imagine what he could do with my heart. He said he took that moment with him for the rest of his life. And he said, God can transform the most desperate, lost heart in a moment. And that shaped and changed him for the rest of his life. There's a book called The Power of Moments. And in the book, they said this. They said, defining moments shape our lives, but we don't have to wait for them to happen. We can be the authors of them. You see, what happens, though, is sometimes we put a limit on them. We put a limit on what I have the ability to do or what God can do with me, or we put a limit on where we're going on this journey, and we're constantly creating these limits. But the song that we just sang, there was a line in there that says, there is no limit to what you can do. And if you're confused on what that meant, it means there is no limit to what God can do. And if that still isn't sticking, then the simple phrase of there is no limit. There's no limit. And I say that to myself on a regular basis. There's no limit in this moment. There's no limit in this adventure. There's no limit in this story. There's no limit in the places that God can bring me. I just have the courage. I have to have the courage to step into them. You see, what happens is we have a moment, and then another moment, and then a moment, and a couple more moments. And before we realize it, our life is just a series of moments because we haven't fully stepped into the beauty of what God can do in some of these things. And sometimes you'll see there'll be this big moment, but then it's like, that was great, but now what? In Colossians 1, verse 1, Paul is writing to the church of Colossae, and he just simply says this. He says, I, Paul, have been sent on special assignment by Christ as part of God's master plan. I read that verse probably 50 times this week, and I don't know if it's because my name is Paul, but I read it and I'm like, whoa, because he has a tendency to write these first verses, the first 2 or 3 verses, you skip them, because it's like, it's great. I, Paul, I'm with these people, I'm going that place. Great. What are we really talking about? But here he says, I, Paul, have been sent on special assignment by Christ as part of God's master plan. And that's not just him, that's each and every single one of us. If we step into it, I, Judy, I, Aaron, I, Melinda, I, Nate, am a part of God's special assignment, and I've been sent to be a part of his master plan. That is so powerful if you understand it and step into it. Yeah, but I just don't know. The song says there's no limit. And God says in scripture over and over again, there's no limit. On this weekend, you think about the life like a man like Martin Luther King Jr., who stepped into his moments and stepped into what God had planned for him, knowing that it could cause him death, and yet he still courageously moved forward. I even look at the life of Jack Chin Chin. It's our 20-year anniversary, and I don't know how you have a sermon here on the stage without talking about Palmer's dad, Jack. You see, Jack and Nell started the African Bible colleges. And because of that, Palmer grew up in the jungle and experienced and watched his parents live through miracle after miracle after miracle. And so when the Grove was started, it was started with that same legacy of understanding how God can step into these impossible moments. And because of that, Justice College was just launched. But if you go the other way and look at his dad starting the African Bible colleges, the only reason that happened is because he was walking through the jungles and it wasn't really working in the way he thought it would, and realizing that Africans can change Africans, and started the African Bible College to train them. So it was this moment of, aha, this is what I need to do. But if you step even farther back, he was a pastor. And he was sending people to become missionaries. And he realized one missions week that he's like, I need to go. If I'm going to send these people, then I need to go. And if you go back even further, the only reason he was a pastor is because he went to Bible school late in life. And after he got done, he then starts a church. And if you go back this way even a little bit more, he was a farmer, a very successful farmer. You go back a little bit farther, and one day his wife came to him and said, here's a Bible. I just wanted to give you this. See, he wasn't a Christian. He didn't understand this Jesus journey. He didn't understand any of these faith things. Yet his wife gave him a Bible. Now he has another choice in that moment. Am I going to read it, or am I going to let it sit? So a long time ago, decades ago, Jack Chin Chin decided to read his Bible. Nell Chin Chin decided to give him one. That changed the course of history. I'm convinced we would not be sitting here in this setting, in this type of atmosphere, if she wouldn't have given him that Bible all of those years ago. You see, there's power in these moments. The question that I get is, then how? And if you've heard me speak, you know my statement, deep theological statement, figure it out. There's just like literally, just figure it out. Just start going, just start seeking, just start asking, just start moving, just start reading your Bible. Just do something. It says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 9, he goes on to write this. He said, be assured that from this day, this first day we heard of you, we haven't stopped praying for you, asking God to give you wise minds and spirits attuned to his will, and so acquire a thorough understanding of the ways in which God works. So you want to step into these generational God moments. You want to step into these things that change the course of history. Then he says you need to have wise minds and a spirit attuned to his will. The first thing he says is have a wise mind. Well, the first step you could do is to start to read your Bible, but that's kind of the easy Christian statement. So I tried to go through those read through the Bible in a year things, and the problem is you miss one day. Now I got to read for 2 days. And you miss those 2 days, I'm like, that's a lot of reading. Now I'm at 3 or 4 days. By day 4, I'm like, that's like 600 pages that I got to read. I'm out. So I got this Bible called the Scribe Bible, and there's a reading plan in the back. It's to read through the Bible in a year, and I got to read like 10 verses, 2 chapters, something like that in the Old Testament. I read a little bit of the Psalms. I read a little bit of the Gospels, and I read a little bit of Paul's letters. It takes me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes. But the beauty is, of every single month, I can skip 5 days. So I can skip 5 days and still feel like a hero. And I'm never falling behind. It's called the Scribe Bible. And I have found the ability for a person like me to read through the Bible every single year. Now, you use the word wisdom and talk to any of my family and friends and say, would you describe Paul as a wise person? So they don't even know me and they're laughing at me. What in the world? So wisdom was not something that I was naturally gifted as a child. I remember in high school, my dad asked me to trim the hedge. Case in point. And I'm using the trimmer thingy, and I'm thinking, what would happen if I stuck my finger in there? So I stick my finger in, and I go, I should test it first. So I got this big stick that was bigger than my finger, stuck it in, and snap. Oh, I'm like, oh, it would cut off my finger. I wouldn't have known that. A little while later, I'm riding my bike, and I'm coming into this huge group of people, and I'm thinking, oh, it'd be really funny if I crash and then drive into a tree and then roll down a hill. Well, I snapped my shoulder. That's the bad thing. The even dumber thing is you think, well, like all guys, all boys, we did stuff like that. I was 31 years old. 31, and I'm still thinking this is a good idea. So if I can seek wisdom, I'm telling you, you're so much farther ahead than I am. But it starts with these moments. This time of sitting in Scripture and praying and asking God. It says in James chapter 1, it says this. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. It's not that hard. And then he says, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Another translation says this. It says, if you don't know what you're doing, I mean, come on, that's like 95% of all men in the world. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get his help. It won't be condescending to when you ask for it. Ask boldly, believingly. Is that what that says? Believingly, without a second. Did I read that right? If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. Wisdom. That's the first step. That's the first journey about becoming a person who is making generational moments. Nicholas, our soldier guy, at 18, 19, he gets out of the military. He's wounded in his leg that stays with him for the rest of his life, and he becomes a cripple. So he's trying to think what he can do because he came out of poverty. So he takes a job as a footman. A footman opens the door and carries the bags. But he said he was constantly dropping things and dropping people. So he needed a new job. And he thought deep in his heart, and he says, what I really want to do is I want to become a monk, as you do. So he walked to a monastery in Paris, and he became a monk. And he washed dishes. That was his job for 15 years. It got to the point finally where he couldn't stand up anymore. So he started making sandals for people. And that's what he did with the rest of his life. But he said the moment looking at the tree, it changed him and it shaped him, and he realized that a heart can be transformed in a matter of moments. As though he began to pray that he would have wisdom. He began to pray that he would have joy. He began to pray that he would embrace God in every single moment. And he lived the rest of his life praying that God would be with him in these moments. And what happened is that people began to see this dishwasher in the back that was filled with joy, and so people had questions. So they would come and visit the church and come in, they'd say, we'd like to see the priest. And they said, oh, the head guy, they're like, no, the guy in the back, like the dishwasher, because we've heard he's the person that we need to come and speak to. You see, one of the things they said about his life is they said this. They said, despite his lowly position in life, his character attracted many to him. He had a reputation for experiencing profound peace, and visitors came to seek spiritual guidance from him. If any of us in this room had a job as a dishwasher, and we told our family and friends, they would say, oh, what's your goal then? Like, are you going to become a chef next? Are you going to go, is it just temporary? No, he was just a dishwasher, and he was content in that place. And he became known as a man of character. You see, the difference with somebody like that, when you look at the moments and how they just kind of string together, his moments stacked, and they intersected with other people, and people came from all around to hear him and to sit with him and to listen to his wisdom. And so then that went out and changed generations. A dishwasher. In Colossians 1:9, it says again, it says to give you wise minds and spirits attuned to his will. Spirits attuned to his will is something I believe that you just learn. When you begin to step into this journey of pursuing Jesus, there's these nudges, or maybe even a voice, or just a feeling. And if you're a doubter, have you ever been any place where you felt like this nudging of go talk to them, or go send this, or call them, or wait here. I believe that's God speaking to us. We're afraid to step into those moments sometimes, but those are the powerful moments. It says in Ephesians chapter 5, it says this, it says, so be very careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days and don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Careful how you live. Make the most of every opportunity. You see, when you listen to God's Spirit, in your moments, in your days, some amazing things happen. And some of them you're not even aware if this is going to make an impact or not, but you still have to step into it. A couple years ago, I was going up. I turned left on Riggs. I was going to go to the store real quick. We needed milk. I turned left, and as soon as I turned left, I saw this girl standing on the side of the road, and her car had a flat tire. And I just felt this nudging that said, help. That's literally all it was. So I pull over, and I said, hey, do you need help? And she kind of looked back, and I could tell she was a little creeped out. And I said, oh, no, it's cool. I'm a pastor, which made her even step quicker. She's like, nah, I'm good. And I said, look, can I help you change your tire? She goes, yeah, I don't know how to do this. And I looked at her, and I said, your dad failed you. I didn't really say that. And so I got down, and I started to change her tire, and all of a sudden this other car pulls up. And she looks at me, she goes, I'm sorry, sir, but I'm really late for work. And my sister is here. She's going to take me to work. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I got your keys. I'm just going to head up to Colorado, and I'm going to sell this thing, and I'll make my way back. And she just kind of looked at me. I'm like, it's cool, go. And she said, my parents are coming. I'm like, okay. So I changed the tire. The parents still aren't there. I'm like, well, I shut the door and make sure everything's okay. And I'm just kind of standing there waiting on the side of the road with some random person's car and the keys. And all of a sudden the car pulls up and her parents get out and they just kind of look at me and I'm like, and they're looking around. It's obvious they're looking for their daughter because some strange man is standing with their car and the keys. I'm like, hey, here you go. Here's the keys. I changed the tire. You might want to look at the pressure on the other one because it's a little low as well. And they're like, where's insert daughter's name here? I'm like, oh, yeah, she was late to work. So somebody came and picked her up and took her to work. And they're like, and she's left you here? I'm like, yeah. And your car is still here. There's still decency in humankind. And then I felt a little awkward, so I jumped in my car and I just left. End of the moment, moving on. A couple months later, I get tagged in a Facebook post, back when Facebook was still relevant. And it just simply said, that was Paul Gunther. And I'm like, who tagged me? What is this? And I go look, and there's this thread that had been going on for months where they were trying to find the guy that helped their daughter change the tire. And they described, and they said, the only thing we know is that he had a Live Love hat on. And they explained the story. And so my friend tagged me and said, yeah, that was Paul Gunther. You know, these little moments, but they leave an impact. A couple weeks ago, I was at the store. My wife needed to stop to get something, and I'm 52, so I had to go to the bathroom really bad. That's probably too much information. And so I'm running to the bathroom, and all of a sudden I feel this stop and help. And I'm like, stop and help what? And I look, and there's a lady, and she's standing there with eggs literally everywhere, all over the floor, all over her. And I walk up to her. I'm like, do you need help? She goes, yeah, do you work here? I'm like, no, but this happens a lot. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, let me get you some paper, and we'll clean it up. And so I run in the bathroom. Then I got her some paper towels. Then I came back. It was fast, don't worry. And we start cleaning it all up. And we throw it away. And she's standing there. She's like, thank you. She's like, I don't know what to do now. I'm like, go buy some more eggs and put them in your cart this time. And you'll be good. And we went on our way. But you see those moments that for me, it wasn't the experience, it was the nudging, it was the prodding, it was the listening, it was the stopping, it was the obeying. I have no idea who these two people are, no idea. But what if it had generational impact on how they live? You know, this butterfly effect where the things that we do now bring great change later and all around us. Last week, Palmer talked and he said Paul and Melinda Gunther just recently moved into the Live Love house so that they can serve and be closer to the community that we've been serving in for the last 10 years. And I think about the moments that brought us to that place. I write a journal every day of stuff that's happened down there. Yesterday, a guy sat in his car the whole day. Like I'm talking from morning to night. And I even checked in the middle of the night. He's not sleeping there. It's like, I think it's his living room, honestly. But then his dog is in a minivan that's next to him. And the dog lives in the minivan and he lives in the car. And every now and then they go for a walk. Haven't quite figured it out yet, but it's happening. We'll see. We'll tune in next time. I don't know what it is. The other day, a kid was walking down the street. He's just got a butterfly knife, and he's just walking. He's just strolling along with his butterfly knife. If you don't know what a butterfly knife, ask any guy from the 70s. And he's just walking, and I'm like, after school, Chandler High School, they released, there's a drag race right beside me. It's unbelievable. It's, and they're just flying, and I'm like, this is amazing. It's so full of life. But I was sitting in our house the other day, in the apartment side of the house, and I was like, this is kind of small. And so I started measuring, and I'm like, it's 688 square feet that we live in. A German Shepherd, a loud grandson, and my wife and I. And it's beautiful. You see, there's moments when you begin to step into service where you're like, I just need to go a little deeper, and I need to go deeper, and I need to take this and see where God is continuing to lead us. And we moved down there, to be honest, as I shared last time I spoke, because we're building this community center called the Oasis that was designed by the people in the community. And we sat down, my wife and I, and we wrote this small little book pamphlet thing, and the question is, what is Live Love? That we get all the time. What is Live Love? And I always say yes, because that's our website, whatislivelove.org. And we wrote in here, and here's what Live Love is. It's caring for others. It's showing up to serve. It's bringing people together. It's providing needed resources. It's creating safe spaces. It's expanding support networks for the most isolated and vulnerable. And as Christ followers, I really believe that we are called to step into those moments. Jack DeBartolo, who's our architect, he designed this building, and he's also designing the Oasis. He sent me an email on Friday, and my wife, Melinda, he says, good news, we just submitted final plans to the city. And inside I was like, oh, it's amazing. But then I was also panicking, thinking, what in the world? Now we have to figure out how to pay for this thing. Now we have to start building. Now it becomes real. So it's the most unbelievable moment and the scariest moment. And yet, when you continually are stepping into where God is leading you, he's telling you to be wise. And in verse 9, he says, be wise. He's talking about having spirits. Go to verse 9 of chapter 1. Have wise minds, have a spirit attuned to his will. But then it says, and so acquire a thorough understanding of the ways in which God works. And I don't know if we can ever get to a place where we have a thorough understanding of how God works, but I believe that we can step into that journey. Here's the thing with Nicholas Herman. He was born in 1614. He died February 12th, 1691. When he walked into the monastery, they said, you have to pick a new name. And he says, I'd like to be known as Brother Lawrence. So Brother Lawrence lived out his entire life as a dishwasher, as a sandal maker. When he died, his cousin was there. There was no huge funeral. There were no books that he wrote. There were no great speeches. There was just his life. And yet people like A.W. Tozer and Henry Nouwen and some of these great theologians and writers talk about the impact that he had on their life. 331 years ago, this man died. After he died, they took his letters that he sent people, and they took his interactions that they had, and they put it into a book after his death. And it's called The Practice of the Presence of God. And it sold millions of copies because of how a dishwasher lived his life. Don't ever limit what God can do in your life. Don't ever limit the journey that you can go on. Don't ever limit how he calls you and leads you. You see, Brother Lawrence is known literally throughout the world. And almost not one person knew who he was when he was alive. You see, that's how we change the world. That's how we become moment makers. That's how we make generational change through our moments. And I would ask you to pray as we move forward in this next 20 years of life, how do we become the type of people that changes not only the lives of those around us, but the lives for generations to come?